And that's where I was like, wait a second, I'm doing this all wrong. Because, yeah, in Bali, everyone knows me, but in Bali, I'm just famous in the expat community. There's 300 million Indonesians that I'm not tapping into. And so that's when I started to change my comedy, and I made many more. And now my comedy is focused on Indonesian audience. And what I do a lot of research about Indonesian traditions and pop cultures and reference and so on.
Hey, welcome back to another episode. So we've got a great guest for you today. His name is Christian. Let me look it up. Giacobbe, right? So he's an Italian guy. He moved to Bali. And once he moved to Bali and he was in his like early to mid 30s, he decided, hey, fuck it, let's become a full-time stand-up comedian. Which is, I think crazy in itself. And then when you consider that he started to do it in a country where he doesn't speak the language, it sounds even more insane, right? But he has done a wonderful job of carving out a niche, right? He started out just doing shows, comedy for like the expat community in Bali. So his English was fine, right? And then he's kind of expanded his comedy to be more inclusive to more Indonesians, and he really kind of has built this audience around being, very pro Indonesia. I think he's got a bunch of funny bits that I've organically seen online before I even asked him onto the podcast. So he has been doing this for a few years. And as part of his comedy, he's been developing more content to help publicize himself. And, he's got multiple channels as well. But I think that he's doing some really interesting things, and he is starting to monetize it. So it's not his full-time job, but it supplements his income. It's helping build his comedy career. And so for me, I think he has a lot of really good lessons for any content creator. And he has a very unique background and experience when it comes to it. So very excited for you guys to watch this episode. A lot of really good and interesting takes. So please enjoy on to this episode. Christian, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So you are a stand-up comedian, content creator, living in Indonesia, but you're not Indonesian. So tell us, share a little bit about your background and how you ended up in Indonesia.
Well, I ended up in Indonesia by pure luck, I would say. Because before being a content creator and before being a stand-up comedian, I was a sales manager. I was working corporates, and I was between jobs. And I got this new job. It was the job of my life. It was a $1 billion company, best position I've ever had. 2 days before I started working on a Saturday, I was supposed to start on a Monday. The vice president calls me and he's like, "Chris, we made a mistake. We don't have a job for you." I'm like, what do you mean? "Yeah, we don't have a job for you." I'm like, "Yeah, but I quit my previous job and the rent." And because I was supposed to move to another country, I was like, "Well, what are you talking about?" And it was like, "Here's 1 year salary, fuck off." And I was like, "All right, moving to Bali." And that's how I ended up in Indonesia. So for the first 2 years, I just did nothing. I just enjoyed life because that was a good salary. And but I was doing public speaking. I don't know if you know what Toastmasters is.
I am familiar.
Yeah, I was the president of two clubs, of two Toastmaster clubs in Bali. And then by chance, somebody said, that there's no comedy in English in this country, really. So I started doing comedy. And then from there, I started working on TV. And nowadays, if you are a stand-up comedian, you kind of have to be a content creator. At the beginning, I tried to fight it a little bit because I was like, no, I want to be a pure comedian. Those content creators are not comedian. But now I love it.
So maybe I missed it. You came from Italy to Bali, right?
Yes.
And you didn't know anyone in Bali. You were just like, hey, I heard great things about this.
Yeah, pretty much. Like I was like, if I like it, I'll stay. If not, I'll keep on going. And obviously, I liked it because it's been 6 years.
Yeah, and then you said you didn't have any background as a stand-up comedian, you were just like, there's no English stand-up comedy here, and that's kind
Yep.
of what took you into that direction.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. When I was younger, I did a little bit of theater, or I worked that we used to have this in Italy where it was a summer job. You would work in resorts all over the world just for Italian people. And my job was to be an entertainer. So during the day, I was making sure that people had fun. And then during the evening, I would just host games or do musicals or whatever. But I never did stand up before I moved to Indonesia.
So this is wild because you're like a full-blown adult when you're doing this. This isn't like your formative years.
Yeah, I'm not a kid. I was 34 when I moved to Indonesia, something like that. Yeah.
So in your mid 30s, you decide, hey, I'm going to be a stand-up comedian in a country that doesn't speak my language. So
Yeah, the way you describe it makes it sound worse than it was. I didn't really think it that way, but yeah, that's exactly what happened.
I mean, I love it. It's crazy. But I guess my follow-up question is around comedy itself, right? Because a lot of comedy, or at least stand-up comedy that I'm familiar with, is very cultural, right?
Yeah.
So it's not just a language, right? There are little nuances that make things very funny, right? And if the
Absolutely.
audience doesn't pick up on it, right, then the joke, even if you're saying it in the perfect language, doesn't hit, right? So how are you like balancing that part of it when you're coming up with your initial act?
Well, because at first I wasn't doing comedy for Indonesian people. So at first I was doing comedy for the Bali subculture, which is this international community. Like every time I would have, and still now when I do shows in Bali, every time I do a show, there's 15 different nationalities. So what you do is you have general jokes. Because if you go too Australian, the Russians are not going to understand. If you go too Russian, the Americans are not going to understand. So you go general joke, and then you do the Bali specific jokes, which is the subculture of Bali, which is the life coaches and the crypto bros and the gym bros and stuff like that. And then because it became so big in Bali, I got contacted by Kompas TV, which is a national television, one of the biggest TV stations in Indonesia. We did a show together. And that's where I was like, wait a second, I'm doing this all wrong. Because, yeah, in Bali, everyone knows me, but in Bali, I'm just famous in the expat community. There's 300 million Indonesians that I'm not tapping into. And so that's when I started to change my comedy, and I made many more. And now my comedy is focused on Indonesian audience. And what I do a lot of research about Indonesian traditions and pop cultures and reference and so on.
Interesting. Yeah, just for everyone's reference, uh I saw one of Christian's videos, long ago from this TV show where it's a joke about how Indonesians make themselves invisible. So we'll link to that later on. So your comedy is evolving, right?
Absolutely.
And you fought it, but you're using content to promote yourself, right? Which is what all comedians have to do, right? So I guess now you have multiple channels, right? I've seen you have like a vlog, you have your own podcast, right? So I want to get into how that evolved, but like what was your first thing that you were posting, right? In terms of like your comedy and getting your name out there beyond just the expat community.
So what I did, and when I decided, okay, I really need to push it, is when I started to do this TV show. So this TV show is like a master chef for comedians, let's say. And I did the 10th edition. And it's a huge TV show. Like one of the judges now just became a senator. The other judge has over 25 million followers. Like it's a big deal. The other judge is the biggest movie producer in Indonesia. So it's a huge deal. And I had a lot of eyes on me. So I was like, okay, since every single episode I had to perform and do a new set, let me get clips. So at the beginning, I started by posting clips of my comedy material. The problem with that is that as a comedian, that is not sustainable. And for example, the most popular comedian right now on Instagram is Matt Rife. Matt Rife became famous because he posted the crowd work. And that is very interesting, and it's very smart of him. First of all, he's a much better crowd worker than pure stand-up comedian, but crowd work is exceptional. But the thing is that to master a joke, it takes much longer than people think it does. So if I post one of my jokes, that joke is lost. And for a comedian, the end goal is to put your special, so your 1 hour of stand-up comedy, on digital download or on a streaming platform. And if I use too many jokes, then nobody's going to watch the special because they already watched the jokes. So what you do is that you either do crowd work or you have to do something different and start to come up with different kind of content as not to burn your material.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I think a lot of comedians have taken that crowd work angle.
Yeah.
Now I think Stavi is another one that comes to mind. But I mean, forgive me, when I was researching, right, I didn't see a ton of crowd work in your content, right? So if why did you go away from that when everyone's doing that? And then what kind of made you go to the other direction?
Is because, first of all, the thing that you have to know is you have to understand your audience. So crowd work, I do much more crowd work when I do international shows than when I do Indonesian shows. Because it's easier. Like Indonesian shows, at least for me, it's not as easy to do crowd work because I don't know that much about the culture. Because at the end of the day, if you go to Jakarta, 90% of the people are Muslim. And then there's going to be the Chinese Indonesian, and everyone is already married. Everyone already has kids. Like usually there's a few questions like, are you on a date? Or like there's tricks that you use for the crowd work. Which for me to do it with an Indonesian crowd is a little bit more complicated.
Got it. Yeah. So how do you describe your content then to someone who is just learning about you?
So I do different things in my content because the thing about being recognizable is that you have your shtick, you have your persona, and then you follow pretty much the same thing. Like fitness influencer, every day they post about the workouts, which is very boring for me. Like it's impressive one day, but I don't follow any fitness influencer because I've seen your post, I've seen all your posts. What I do is that I have like 3-4 different topics that I talk about. One of them is I post about clips from my comedy. Easy. And then if that gets traction, then I expand on that, making content that relates to the topic of that joke. For example, I did a joke that became super viral about the Indonesia and Malaysia. Indonesia and Malaysia, they're always butting heads against each other. And I did this joke that went completely viral about the slogans, where I say, Malaysia should change their slogan. In Malaysia, we steal everything from Indonesia. It got, between platforms, more than 10, 12 million views. And because of that, I kind of became a national hero for Indonesian, and I got canceled from Malaysian. Like I received death threats, I received thousands of hate messages from Malaysia. I can't go to Malaysia. But Indonesian loved it because it's like, we always wanted to say that, and we never did, because there is this, like, and if you're listening and you're Indonesian, Malaysian think that beef rendang is from Malaysia, which is not. They think that batik is from Malaysia, which is not. And this is the resentment that all Indonesian have. And so now I do a lot of content about the thing that Malaysian claim they're theirs, but they're actually Indonesian. Another thing that I do content about is Bule blocks, or stupid foreigners. And in Bali, there's plenty. And so every time there is a video that surfaces of an idiot foreigner that falls from the bike or gets into a fight or does something disrespectful. Now I receive dozens and dozens of messages like, Chris, you have to talk about this. Chris, you have to talk about this, which is great because now I don't even have to do the research. Like is my fan base, my audience that tells me you should talk about this and you should talk about that. Another thing I do, and this again came from another joke. I made another joke because I'm Italian, talking about cappuccino cinciao. Have you ever heard about cappuccino cinciao?
No.
Good. You're a very lucky person. So basically, Indonesian, which have some of the best food in the world, have also some of the worst food in the world. And then decided to take cappuccino, which is already perfect, and they added grass jelly, which is called cinciao. And in one of my set, I was very passionate and very angry about that. It became viral. And so now every time Indonesian post weird food, mostly Italian, weird way they cook pasta, weird way they make carbonara, then I react to that and I get angry about it.
Okay, so the way that you're creating and planning your content, right, is you've established your pillars, right? The
Yeah.
one you right. And so now it's a matter of finding the idea that fits into this pillar and then just creating. And you have, reaction videos, you have skits, different formats that you're doing, but that's essentially how you are going about. And then, the inbound, right? So that's how you plan out the content, right?
Yes. I'm not a very great planner, but I have a lot of ideas. So like for the past, I don't know, 3 weeks, I posted, I think, 2, 3 reels every day because I have so many ideas. Now, the lucky thing is that on one side, both for the Italian food review, for the Malaysian, and for the idiot foreigners, now I don't even need to look for it because people just send me messages and people tag me on it. What I started to do recently is I also started to receive a lot of offers of collaborations. And so now I, for example, go to some restaurants and do review. Right now I'm at the Hard Rock Hotel. I'm doing a review of the hotel. And I do that with brands, with hotel, with restaurants. And also, since I recently started my podcast, just like you're doing, I'm also posting clips of my podcast.
Okay, so I want to get into your collaborations, but just to kind of like sum this up, it sounds like, a lot of content creators that I speak to are very similar. They don't have like a spreadsheet, a structure of like, hey, we're gonna post this on this day, right? You probably have like a note, maybe even a WhatsApp chat to yourself where you're typing in, your
Pretty much.
ideas, right? And then it's surprising to me to hear you say that you post 2 or 3 reels in a day, right? Will you go a day? Do you want to post every day, or do you want to post, 3 today and then take 2 days off? Or is it just literally when the ideas come to you?
Before it was just when the idea came to me. Now I try to at least post once per day.
Got it. Okay. And so I think that's, obviously a great strategy. Consistency is huge to being, better content creator. Um, but yeah, I'm very interested in the brand deals, right? And so I think different content creators approach monetization differently, right? Some are purely want to do it through the brand deals. Others are trying to sell like an online course. Others are, have another business, whatever it may be, right? But you got into this for the comedy and the exposure, right?
Mhm.
Are you just like taking the brand deals? Like, how are you approaching it? How do you choose who you want to work with? And are there any, criteria around that?
So first of all, um, as of now, I never approached the brand. So I'm not actively making brand deals. I only receive requests and then I answer to it, which is obviously not optimal and is something that I'm working on to find the right team so I can make more of it. When I do brand deal and the brands that contact me, the difference between me and most content creators is that many brands are not necessarily want me online, but they want me offline. I do a lot of corporate gigs, and I did corporate gigs for huge brands. I did corporate gigs for Puma. I did corporate gigs for Oppo. I the other day I did a show, and a representative of Gojek came to meet me because, of course, there is the online presence, which I do, and I did reels, and I'm still doing it, and I'm learning to do it in a better way. As if you see my content, you immediately see, for example, the first thing is that I should buy a new phone because the quality of my reels is shit. And it's fine. Like I mean, it's not fine. It's something I need to improve, definitely. But on the other hand, I'm very unique in Indonesia, which is something I'm very thankful for, because yes, there are several in Bule content creator, foreigner content creator. There's no other comedians. I'm actually the first comedian in the country that does comedy in English on national television. And even when now they invite me on TV, for example, they invited me on a talk show, and it was me and the Minister of Tourism of Indonesia, and I was the representative of the foreigners in the country. So right now I'm trying to do a balancing act, because I want to start doing more TV and more movies, and I want to promote myself as a comedian. Right now I have a lot of shoes. And that's why I think that right now I have a problem with structure, and I think now that the most important thing for me is to find the right balance between all these different hats that I'm wearing.
I mean, that'll just happen over time.
Yeah.
So I don't want to know too much, but I'm just curious. Are you able to make a full-time living from your content yet, or is it still kind of like on a ad hoc pocket money here and there?
Uh, I wouldn't say from my content. I do it from my comedy. Absolutely,
Yeah.
I've been doing professional. Like I've been not only providing for myself but for my family for now 4 years just with my comedy. The content right now, I would say, is 20%, 20 to 30%, depend on the month of
Okay.
my
Yeah.
income.
So it's still working its way up.
Yeah.
So then what is your goal that you're kind of working towards? Because you just I saw you launched your podcast, right? You have these multiple content channels. So you're spending a lot of time and energy on these, right? So there's got to be a reason behind that.
Well, for me, is the way I work is that everything feeds everything else. So the bigger content creator I'm becoming, the more people are coming to my show. The more people are coming to my show, the more people are going to follow me online. And so I want to grow everywhere. Like I am a very I am obsessed. Like I work harder than everyone else. And that's the thing in comedy. Like talent means nothing. It's literally how much you work. And so what I want everything. I want the Netflix special. I want the movies. I want the TV shows. I want the millions of followers. I want the millions of subscribers on YouTube. I want everything. And how do I get it? By I'm doing a lot of things right. I'm doing a ton of things wrong. But again, you have to get the know-how. You have to practice. You have to keep on trying. And the only way that I see my path going forward is just keep on outworking everyone else, and the result will come.
I love it. Yeah, but I think what I'm hearing is comedy is still your number one. That's your
Yes.
North Star.
Yes.
And yes, everything feeds into that. But being the comedian is where you want your content to really help you.
Yes. Yes.
Got it. This has been great. I want to ask you one more question before you get out of here. You have been, you've been telling us your story. You say that you don't have necessarily the best processes. You tell us that you don't you know uh things are still kind of like trial and error, right? But
Absolutely.
you're growing and you're building a name for yourself, right? So you have some lessons to impart on either younger or content creators, people who are earlier in their creator journey. So is there any piece of advice that you would give someone when they're just starting out?
Yes, and actually it's funny that your preface was the fact that I'm doing a lot of mistake, and that's the key. If you're and this is in business, this is in content creation, this is in comedy. If you're waiting for things to be perfect, you never start. Like you have to put yourself out there. So you want to be a content creator, of course you can buy a good phone, but if you're waiting and you're saying I'm not going to post until that I just make this thing, then you'll never post. Just start doing it. Things are going to go back, because no matter what, when you look back at 1 year ago, 6 months ago, 2 years ago, you're going to think, oh, that was shit. Why? Because you grew so much and you understood and learned so much. So no matter what you did in the past is going to be shit. So 2 years from this is the issue. If 2 years from now you see the post you're making now, you're like, oh, that was good post, it means you haven't grown at all. So just get yourself out there and just keep grinding. Consistency will always beat talent. Hard work will always beat talent. I have some friends that make some very good content and then they post once every 3 weeks. What do you expect?
Very wise words. I think those that can be taken from not just a content creator, but anyone, right? I think for
Yeah,
us
opening a
as a business,
company, everything,
yeah,
everything.
yes, absolutely. No, I love it, dude. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank
Congrats
you.
on the success. Looking forward to seeing your Netflix special. Wishing you all the best.
Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the pod. I hope you enjoyed it and you learned some valuable lessons. We'll put links to all the social media down in the description. If you're an agency, don't forget to go to slice.id and sign up for a free trial, or hit me up, Jesse at slice.id, and I can give you a demo. Content creators, also, you can go to slice.id and check out what we have for you. Thank you so much. Follow us on social media. Join Slice on all the social media platforms. Thank you, and see you next time.